Welcome to Live with Greg, or Live with Greg, depending on semantics.
I'm here with my friend Tony Vidal, founder of Prankster Entertainment, that has 3 feature films out in the world.
Right. And don't forget Luna the Cat.
And Luna the Cat. And off in the distance. All right, how you doing?
I am doing great. I'm glad we're finally having this interview.
Yeah.
We have a lot of history together.
We do. I was thinking about that, like when you did the Prankster and invited me to do the EPK.
Yeah, should we give a little history here?
Sure.
2008, we shot the Prankster, and you were doing the EPK, and then the very famous scene where we were in the lair of the pranksters. We had to cut a shot because some guy was hiding in the boxes and tumbled over, and it was you getting a behind-the-scenes shot in the scene. So
yeah, I do. I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me of that.
But yeah, there's a lot of great behind-the-scenes material for Prankster, which is on YouTube. So 2008, the Prankster, and then not till 2017, we did a movie called Baja, which was shot entirely in Baja, California, which was quite an adventure. We should talk about that. And then 2019, another movie here in the Bay Area called Byrd.
Yes.
So 3 features are all on Amazon Prime and Tubi and other platforms. So.
All right, so let's talk about your history with film. Do you recall when you first were interested in movies?
Yes, I do. I went to UC Davis as an undergraduate, and I was very interested in English and English literature. And the reason I became interested because I was, at times, reading stories, novels, plays, etc., that touched my heart and touched my soul. And I came from a background where I felt fairly oppressed for various reasons, and these books and literature with messages of hope and expanding of possibilities really inspired me, and I decided I want to do something like that in my life, is to raise consciousness and inspire other people with my creations. And I started with some writing, but it soon became apparent to me and to my preference that I wanted to do film, because film was the most dynamic and powerful medium of my time, and I think our time still. It's not film anymore, it's streamed entertainment, but whatever, the story, film story, has the power to wake people up and change lives, and that's really was seductive to me and was also inspirational, and I wanted to see if I could do that. So then I went to USC Film School and got a master's degree in screenwriting, because I thought, that must be the way to do this. Just go to grad school and, they'll just welcome you with open arms into the film business. And while I learned a lot at USC and have no regrets about that experience, it was a different journey to try and get something made in the corporate film world. Very difficult.
From USC, you ended up at Orion?
Yeah, one of my first jobs out of grad school was to be a story analyst, which is basically a script reader. And what we did was write synopses of scripts that were submitted for potential production, and we'd write a short comment. And it's actually a very important job because all the executives at the biggest studios even, and everywhere else, but I actually was very lucky to be hired by United Artists, they rely on script coverage from the reader for a lot of decision making. I mean, they don't have time to read 30, 40 scripts, so they can read a reader's coverage, it's called coverage, in one paragraph get the gist of the story, and in 2 or 3 paragraphs get a commentary, which is not necessarily a yay or nay for as far as they're concerned, but it gives them some insight into the positives and negatives of that script. And to be sure, they weren't just selecting projects based on the script. Things came in, and obviously things that came in from powerful actors or producers or directors were given preference and often made, even if a reader, didn't like the script. But all that said, a script reader's job was really essential, and it gave me the opportunity to read all the best screenwriters in Hollywood for all the major motion pictures that were being made. So it was like a PhD in scriptology, if you will, just to be reading hundreds of scripts from the most established writers and to kind of hone my own knowledge and start to begin to hone my craft as a writer, because what I really wanted to do was to write and become an established screenwriter, and from there hopefully to direct. That's kind of the youthful fantasy that sometimes is achieved but not often, to sell a script and sell another one and then maybe get asked to direct, and there's a lot of things that could go sideways, but anyway, that was my goal at the time.
Okay. And how long were you in the Hollywood machine?
All of about 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah. And I worked for 3 different studios. United Artists and another studio called Orion Pictures, and then another sort of quasi-studio called the Ladd Company that was run by Alan Ladd Jr., who had been running Fox Pictures and did his own thing. But I worked for some of the biggest studio heads at the time. I mean, the names are Mike Medavoy, Gareth Wiggin, Mark Canton, Alan Ladd Jr. And these guys were actually very powerful people who could greenlight movies. So I thought, hey, I'm in the right place. I'm like, I see this guy in the hallway and say hi, he knows who I am. One day I'm going to get him a script and, good things will happen. So I felt good about that at the start.
Did you ever hand a screenplay to any of the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, eventually I had my screenplays. That's Luna. Or is that Bodhi? That's Bodhi. I did, and they were politely passed on. And after 3 years of reading hundreds of scripts and sitting in a room, keep in mind I'd been to college, then to grad school, and now being a reader, I was getting into my late 20s by then, and I realized that I had been sitting in rooms reading and writing almost my entire 20s. And of course, one of the things I was inspired by in the great literature and films was, hey, go out and live your life. And here I was sitting in a room reading and writing and not really getting to where I wanted to go, and it felt very confined and constrained. So I at a certain point I just said, okay, if I'm writing one more script, and if by the end of this year, which was 1980, yes, I'm old, I'm sorry. If that doesn't, give me my big break, then I'm going to go off and take a break and do some traveling. And I had actually been in therapy with a really great therapist who encouraged me to break out. And he himself had done a lot of traveling. He was from Brazil originally and had gone on some really long, great journeys. And he advised me, hey, do this now while you're still young and you don't have other commitments. And it'll give you something to write about too, because to be honest, at age 27, well, I had sort of learned how to craft a screenplay. I did not have the life experience to really say anything that was deep or meaningful. I mean, I could craft a genre piece, a horror or an adventure or something, but it was just an exercise. It wasn't from the heart. So I in my heart, I realized I needed to take a risk and go traveling. So I quit my job, left my apartment, and went on a 6-month trip to Arizona, New Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Peru. And in Arizona, New Mexico, I was just traveling in a little truck with a camper shell and camping out on the side of the road, and in Mexico all I had was a backpack in South America. And so I hit the road. It was very Jack Kerouac-esque, and was one of the great adventures of my life. And I satisfied that itch. At the end of 6 months, which is a long time, running out of money, and got sick with hepatitis in Peru. And I found out that my stepmother back in California, Northern California, was come down with cancer. I said, okay, time to come home for a lot of reasons. And so I came back to the Bay Area and have never left.
Wow. Did you come back to Marin?
I did. I came back to Marin in 1981. This trip I'm talking about was in end of 80 into 81. And yeah, I've been here since. Yeah, it's amazing. Where has time gone?
Waits for no one. So you were close with your stepmother?
Yes, you could say that. Yes, I was. A significant person in my life, and she was dying, and I wasn't going to just be too busy to not be there, so I was there, and I helped out. Helped in her transition.
Was she an encouragement in your life to pursue your dreams?
She was a loving person who showed care and affection to me, even though she didn't come into my life till I was a teenager, and I honored that. I think both her and my father were very skeptical of what I was doing, and I think they had fear about it, and it was something they didn't understand, and maybe it was something, I don't know, not a lot of encouragement, no.
Okay. Was The Prankster written when you were in LA? The first draft?
So the deal is, I took quite a break from writing and from film in the 80s, and after my stepmother died, my father invited me to work with him. He was a real estate investor, and he mostly had apartments that he self-managed. And to me at the time, there was another party involved in helping us work together, and he was a real estate broker named Herb. But anyway, with Herb's sort of being the buffer between my father and I was invited to work for my father, and we transformed his holdings into something much bigger and better over a period of 7 or 8 years. And the carrot for me was, my father was always obsessed with money, and I think as a young person I resented that, and I thought, this is stupid and I hate it. But on another level, I was really wishing, gee, I wish I had some power and some money. And so on some level, mostly unconscious, it seemed to me, okay, and Herb talked me into this too, which was understandable. Said, look, you could come here and in a few years be the president of the company and have, a lot of freedom and money that you can make your own damn movie, not just, depend on someone else. I don't know if he said that per se, but that's what I was thinking. So.
Yeah, and that's what happened.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, during the 80s, I worked in real estate, and around 1990, I decided, I saw a career counselor who pointed me back to what was obvious all along, that my real passion was writing and filmmaking. And I said, well, yeah, sure. And I'm still young, and now I have a lot more life experience to inform my work. So I started writing again in the early 90s, and I started turning out screenplays, and I was very prolific. I wrote a couple books and several screenplays over a period of 4 or 5 years, and fortunately my severance from working with my father gave me enough money to just sort of devote myself to writing for several years. I just lived on, the settlement, and I considered it. I saw something in the paper where there was remember Ali Akbar Khan
Yes.
School of Music?
Yes.
So I read something in the paper where someone was given a $400,000 grant just to write music, and I said, well, I'd like to do that. And then basically, with the settlement, I said, well, this is my grant to do what I want. I'm granting this to myself, and I'm not going to worry about the future. So I wrote a bunch of stuff for the next several years, and was very productive, and got back into the LA mix and was going down there regularly, got an agent, meetings, a lot of very hopeful talk, but nothing happened.
And how many years did that go on?
Well, that went on really from the early 90s into the early 2000s. But around about 1995, I met a guy, Mike Kitchens, an assistant director, who's a great character and a wonderful man, who talked to me and said, look, you could try forever to try and get these people to do your movie, and even if they did, they'd rewrite your script and it might never get released. All kinds of bad things could happen. And he'd seen it, and he said, try and get some funding to make your own movie. And at least you can make your movie and make it your own way if you do that. So around 1996, I came out with an independent film business plan, and I started hunting for investors in 96. Prankster was made in 2008.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So that's 8 years later.
More like 12, yeah.
Is it 6 to...
To 2008, yeah.
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So you're pursuing...
Yeah, I was pursuing
Independent.
simultaneously trying to do the independent thing, but also still going to LA and meeting with people. In 2000, I met with Mike Medavoy, the guy I used to work with, who now had Phoenix Pictures, and met in his office. It was really cool, and personal meeting with him. I gave him a script that I had written, and he made a big show of saying, I'm going to put this in the bag. And he's got this leather bag, and he says, very few scripts make it into the bag. And I go, okay, wow, maybe this is going to happen this time. But of course, I got a form letter back from, he obviously had given it to a reader, and there was some coverage. Being a reader, I recognized coverage right away, and so just quoted the coverage and saying, thanks, this stuff is really good, but not good for us at this time, the usual.
Yeah. Oh, God. Were there any close calls with independent funding that...
Well, actually, yes, there were. Well, with Prankster, just to cut to the chase, in the early 2000s, I went to work as a mortgage broker for several years because I had long since run out of money and needed to work regular jobs, and that was a very good regular job. And it also taught me about business and taught me humility, and that just because I had this dream and put everything toward it doesn't mean it's going to happen, or not in my timeline, maybe in divine time. But during that period, I was just mostly working and making a living and supporting a family. But finally, around 2007, my real estate work finally paid off, because one of the buildings that I'd helped my father buy, he sold, and I had a part interest in that building, which didn't really help me until he sold it. Then I got a lot of proceeds, which I said, okay, great, I'm quitting being a mortgage broker, I'm quitting my real job, and now I'm again devoting a portion of the money I have to pursuing my dream. And by that time, it was 2007, I had been pursuing independent film financiers for 12 years, and I did find a couple of wonderful people who did put in some money, but the vast majority of the money from the Prankster came from my own proceeds. So.
Yeah. So then,
and I decided to go for it. So 2007, the deal closed on the building, and I found those two other investors, and by September of 2008, we were shooting the Prankster. And I was on my way on that path of independent film.
Right.
Once you make an independent film, not only do you learn about making a film, but you also learn about the business side. Okay, what do I do with it afterwards? What's possible in distribution? And all that's against a changing landscape, because things have dramatically changing every year or two.
right,
I mean, they still are, right?
Yeah. So do you have any peak experience, memories from the Prankster as a production?
I remember being totally stressed out.
That's funny. That's a peak experience of my memory of Baja. It was like the end of my rope. Were you totally stressed out?
No, I mean, look, that was just an aspect of it, and most of the time, I wasn't feeling the stress because I was too focused on what needed to be done to make the movie. So, focused on this scene, that scene, the next day, and so forth. So, keeping busy and staying on task was really actually enjoyable, and so yeah, I think that it was really two-sided. It was really a thrill and really enjoyable and amazing to see the words come to life. I should mention that prior to The Prankster, in 2002, I was hired to write a screenplay for an independent producer, Norm Hunter, and it was called Her Best Move, a movie about girls soccer. And Norm's a great guy, and I learned a lot about independent production just by watching him do that film. So I should say I had a bit of a head start in looking at the whole process. And that script was written in 2002. He made the movie in 2005. It got released in 2007, which is when I got the money to do Prankster in 2008. So learned a lot from watching his movie and applied that to mine, and learned a lot more from doing mine.
One thing that comes to mind with the 3 films is with the Prankster, in regards to distribution, it seems like you really just released it into someone else's hands. And by the 3rd film, Byrd, it's really still in your hands as far as distribution. You've hired some people to distribute, but you didn't let it go completely.
Yeah, back then, and we're talking about, the film was done in 2009, it was ready for distribution, and I got it with someone called a producer's rep, who's like an intermediary who knows all the distributors and markets directly to them, and it's kind of like an agent for a finished film, right? So he put it out there, and much to my disappointment, there was not much interest until a company called Strand Releasing, which is a very reputable small distributor, picked it up. Now, what I learned is that the vast majority of the small distributors for independent film don't make much money for the people who made the film. I mean, it's really, those distributors are kind of just fielding a bunch of independent films and making a little money from each of them, and that's how they make their living. So they bring in, he was pulling in at least a dozen to 20 films a month to then turn around and go to Netflix or go to Hulu or go to cable channels or whatever. And interestingly enough, he sold Strand Releasing, a guy named John Gerrans, sold it to Stars and Showtime. And you'd say, wow, that's great. And it was great. We had over 200 airings over a 2-year period. About 100 airings on Showtime and 100 airings on Stars. And keep in mind, Showtime has multiple channels. So we were on their 4th or 5th channel, whatever. But got a lot of viewership for the movie. Now, we were paid very little because independent films are beggars. Beggars can't be choosers, and you take what is offered, or they move on. So it wasn't financially lucrative, but it was gratifying to know that, hey, Showtime and Stars are interested in this movie, and they put it out there, and it did well enough to. I mean, how many shows play 100 times
Right.
over 2 years? That's
And
pretty.
did they even renew? Like they had a year and then they renewed?
No, it was
for
a
another
2-year
year?
license.
It was a 2-year. And also in 2009, theatrical was still prominent as a distribution outlet.
Right.
Was that ever talked about with Strand?
Well, sure. I mean, that was the goal, for sure, for every independent film, was to get on the big screen, and very few actually ever make it. So the kind of distribution we got was what most independent films get if they're lucky, was just piecemeal here and there to various platforms. And looking back on it, I have to say really thrilled with the exposure for the film. And the business side, the financial part, was just something I was learning about. And it was not something that you could really expect a big reward. Look, I think making an independent film and wanting or hoping to make money out of it is like trying to win the lottery. There's thousands and thousands of independent films, and the ones that are kind of hit the jackpot, so to speak, are like the ones that get into Sundance, which is a miracle in itself, and then are maybe acquired at Sundance or Toronto or some major festival. So, there's like a dozen films out of thousands and thousands that hit that jackpot. So it started me on a track of really changing my perspective on why I was doing this. And to be fair and honest, and I was doing it for the love of film and to tell a story that I hope would touch people's hearts and raise awareness levels. So to the extent that we got it out on Showtime and Stars and it aired hundreds of times, that was a complete success. Complete success. If you're just looking at it on the financial level, and in our society, in our world, in that film business, financial is kind of like the assumed reason for everything. It's like, oh yeah, you're in this to make money. It's like, well, I've had to adjust my viewpoint. It's like I was in it to tell a story and reach people and hopefully make money. And I've now come to the conclusion that the story is everything, and reaching people and having an impact far transcends the idea of making money. I mean, and so I'm lucky that I was fortunate enough to finance my own movie, because most people can't do that, and they have to be beholden to the idea of, well, these people want, they're going to finance a film, but they want to make money with it, so I have to pretzel myself and my vision to fit what they think will make money, and it becomes a real mess. And what you have is most movies.
So do you feel like all three films represent your true heart of the story that you were hoping to put up?
Absolutely. I've been blessed in being able to do three movies completely the way I wanted to do them for my sensibility at the time. And I will say that my sensibility was influenced by my training in film school and in the studios, and I had a certain sort of vision or even belief that, film stories should look and feel like this. And it wasn't about money, but it was about the 3-act structure, the beginning, middle, and end. And I had seen a lot of films and knew a lot of film history. So my films were kind of infused by the conventional storytelling pattern of past films. And that was fine, and I think they're good examples of that style of filmmaking. Now, at this point in life, I feel like I'm ready to break out of that mold and try to do something, or not try, but actually do something that is not beholden to the traditions. I mean, look, there was a screenwriter named Jeremy Levin who said about structure. Screenplays are well known for being highly structured, and structure is important, but he says, learn structure and use it, and then be free, or something like that. In other words, sort of the starting point of how things are done, but then break the rules as you see fit, and just knowing the rules will help you not go too far afield where you're counterproductive. But anyway, so I'm ready now to really do something far more straightforward in the notion of transformative storytelling and raising consciousness and just really putting it out there in a way that blows people's minds. Instead of being, this is a really good teen comedy, or this is a good road picture, or whatever. This is a good buddy movie that has some dimensions of, spirituality or something more interesting or deeper. Now let's just do the whole thing as a deep exploration of something.
Well, I have two questions. The first is, does that mean that you are considering a fourth film? Honestly, an honest consideration.
Absolutely.
That's impressive.
I have no idea what it will be.
Okay, so there's no story that you think,
No.
no.
I have a collaborator, and
A collaborator in the writing process?
yes,
All right.
yes.
All right. And
Yes, I have a collaborator, and we'll leave it at that.
okay, so behind the scenes, we gotta know. Let's keep that one secret. Okay, that's good. When you're talking about breaking that stereotypical beginning, middle, end, that I love. It brings to mind, I forget Ken's his first name, I forget his last name. He did Tommy, is the famous one. That
Yes.
And, he kind of got into this sort of, I've seen artists who, in the attempt to break rules, they get into this very flamboyant chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess what I'm wondering is,
Ken Russell.
Ken Russell, that's the man. Yes, thank you. Do you feel that there's potential for that for you as a filmmaker? Or, let's just leave it at that. Do you feel like you might get into a chaotic place and...
Well, I mean, chaotic is a function of your viewpoint. To some people it may seem brilliant and coherent. To other people it may seem incomprehensible and chaotic. So yes, going to undiscovered lands.
All right, all right. From a cinematic. All right. Boy, I just. I, for one, am very grateful that you invited me into your world of filmmaking, because I have experiences that I dreamed of, and you and I have spoken of it many times.
Shouldn't we tell your listeners what your role was?
What, for which one? For the Prankster, my role was to test your patience and see.
No, actually, the EPK on that is really outstanding.
Well, thank you.
And once again, just in case our listeners didn't get it the first time, there's tons of YouTube behind-the-scenes videos that Greg did on our Prankster Entertainment YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Check them out.
Yeah. That was... here's one thought I had, because the Prankster, from my perspective, was a very Hollywood production, in the sense that you had an assistant director and all these people, and the way it progressed had a Hollywood production structure.
Well, the reason for that is I didn't know any better, and it was my first film, and I'd seen what Norm did on Her Best Move, and he had pretty much, look, back then, if you're a new filmmaker, and especially a new producer, you ask the people who've been making films, how do you make a film? And they say, oh, you need this guy and this guy and this guy, and this is how you do it. And so your first film, you kind of just let those kind of people take you on that path. And then you refine from there and go, wow, that was okay in some ways, or good, but I think it could be a lot more efficient, or a lot less people, or whatever. So then you refine your style and your team, and you saw that in the progression of my films, from Prankster to Baja, which we should talk about, and finally the Byrd, which was an extremely low budget, extremely small crew, and really was kind of the most fun, because we were so light on our feet.
All right, let's talk about Baja. So, for Below the Line, hired.
Yeah, that was really interesting because I wrote this story that was set almost completely in Mexico. And then, as you know, you were producing that with me. We were looking, how do we shoot this? Where do we shoot this? And we interviewed a bunch of indie producers in LA. And they said, oh, yeah, we could shoot this, over in Riverside or something.
Right.
And I go, well, that's not really, that doesn't sound very good to me, and it's not going to be authentic, obviously. Anyway, I eventually met at AFM a guy who was representing Prankster for foreign sales named Mark Klebanoff, and he said, I know this guy who operates out of Baja, you should talk to him. And he was at AFM. His name was Roger Ellis. Roger Fraser? No, Roger.
Fraser?
He's called Fraser. And
Yes.
Fraser, who...
Bad House Films.
Bad House Films, and he'd been already operating in Rosarito, just below Tijuana, making independent films, making several of them. So he had an ongoing, established team of people and knew how to make movies in Mexico. And so I got introduced to him. We started talking. He came in with a budget that seemed pretty reasonable. And the thing about producing with him was he basically offloaded everything to him in terms of physical production. So it's like you and I just showed up and he had all the departments and taken care of and got the locations and had the permit for shooting. I should mention that he was very proud to tell me that to shoot in Baja, Mexico, you need to go to one office and fill out a form, and they give you a permit to shoot anywhere and everywhere in all of Baja. So the permitting process was pretty straightforward.
Nice. Very different from the United States.
Not only that, then when you get locations, basically you can just hail someone on the street or walk into their shop and say, hey, can we shoot here? And they say, okay, and you shoot.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you drove a motorcycle into a shoe store. You had a casino where they let you use their chips.
Yeah.
I was shocked at that. I was like, what? You're letting us use your chips?
Well, that's the thing about Mexico, and that's why I love it so much. It's like, it's so much looser than what we're used to doing things. It might have been like the U.S. back, I don't mean they're back in time, but just how loose things were maybe in the 50s. Back down there, it's like, and also we were like a big fish in a small pond, so to speak. There's not a lot of films coming through, so say, hey, we're making a film, and they're like honored and flattered and interested, fascinated to see, what we're going to do. So they let us use it for free or for very cheap, and really usually they usually got paid, and it was by American standards almost nothing. So Fraser, and this was the thing too, that was a very shoot from the hip production. He would go line up the location like the day before, which for a director, namely me, that was kind of harrowing to say, do we have the location yet? Can I see it? We're shooting here tomorrow morning.
Right.
And it's like, okay, yeah, I got it. And I walked over to the shoe store in the afternoon and figured out how we were going to do it. But it was really empowering to, in a way that I didn't really welcome at first, was to just be able to shoot from the hip and shoot things and scramble to get locations and scramble to line up all the shots. And so we didn't have the benefit of a complete storyboard and months of pre-production and figuring out every last thing. We just had and there's a lot of risk in that, but also there's a lot of excitement and creativity. And in the moment you go, okay, well, here's the time we got, here's the location, let's do this, this, and this, let's go.
Yeah.
You do it.
Boy, I have stories about Baja. One thing I really admired with Roger and his crew is it was an army of a crew that they were on point,
Mm-hmm.
just moving like an army and that military precise, like we're here and this is happening and here we go.
The crew was great, and the operation of the crew was great. No complaints about that. I was very, very appreciative of that.
Yeah, and what they were willing to do for the good of the production.
And I will say that we, as the gringo producers who came in, we were very respectful and wanting to make sure that everyone was treated properly and was having as good a time as possible. So I think they appreciated that, because I think they've had other producers or directors come in and not be so pleasant to work with.
That's, unfortunate. In any of the 3 films, during production, did you have a moment where you thought, it's over, I can't do this?
Well, I'll give you 2 stories on that. One is the very last shoot day on Baja, we were supposed to be at the airport. You know about the airport. The airport, everyone knew that was the location we needed from the beginning, and up until the day before, even the day of, Fraser wasn't sure we could get the airport. And said, can you write the scene somewhere else? Can it be like, out in the harbor or something? No, the whole thing is set up that his parents arrive on the airport and they meet and stuff. And that had been, from day one. Anyway, so the airport had not been secured, and then Roger says, okay, we got the airport, we're going there in the afternoon, and when we get there, he says, yeah, see if you can get it done in an hour. And then there's like 3 or 4 guys hanging out, looking at us, with their arms crossed, who were associated with the airport. I'm not sure what the hell the deal was, but there was a lot of tension. And I'm thinking, I've got 3 pages of stuff. I was expecting to have all afternoon and into the evening to do this. And just try and get it done in an hour is like, holy shit. Yeah. So we just ran as hard as we could, moved as quickly as we can. Eyes on us, stink eye. But finally, when we got about close to getting the last 2 setups, and they hadn't kicked us out yet, I was going, oh God, we're gonna make it. But I don't know that I was ready to call it quits. I was just petrified that the very last minute we were gonna get an essential part of the movie.
Yeah, the climax. Yeah.
So that was amazingly intense. And then on Freebird, there was a scene one day we were shooting across from the Belrose Theater, and there was a lot of activity and a lot of people that were being managed. And I was across the street with the cameraman. We're getting a shot of the theater, and we're waiting, and I was just going, oh my God. It wasn't that I don't know if I can do this. It's like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. It's like so much hassle with, all the different parts and pieces and waiting, and my back was hurting or something. I don't know. So that was a point in time where I said, I think I need, on my next movie, I need to offload and delegate a lot more and get a lot more support, and not just be the one-man band that I've kind of been.
Right. Is that plausible for film number 4?
Of course it is. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it brings back trauma, right? A trauma response to that.
I will never forget arriving in Loretto. In my mind, I had fucked up and lost our mom, the actress.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I had the blame on that. I was, in my mind, I was to blame for that. We had lost the yacht. I didn't know where I was spending the night. My phone wasn't working.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting at that cafe that we all loved, Heart something, and on the stairs, and they were closed. I was like, I don't know how I could do this.
It's just too hard.
Yeah, I was like at my wit's end. But then there's no flights leaving Loretto, so I was like, oh, well, that's not an option. So now what? We pulled it together. What would you say to an aspiring filmmaker who has not done a film to keep in mind for the best potential success? And, well, here's a question for you. What do you believe is wise to keep in mind for a successful film? That success, what would you define success?
Well, I think that really starts with the story you're telling, for sure. I mean, a successful film is made from a script or a story that has heart and meaning and touches people or opens hearts, opens minds. So first and foremost, script. Really work the script. You know, a really good script that's executed even moderately competently will make a good movie. A bad script that's executed at $100 million Hollywood level will still be a bad movie. So that's essential.
The story.
Work that script till you love it and people love it.
All right. What about from a business perspective? What would you recommend a sponsor?
You know, I don't know how to succeed in the film business on a money level. I just know I've been blessed to be able to make movies and not be as concerned about the money part, which, you know, I grant not many people have that, but I would say to always make the movie that you want to make and be as practical and as efficient as possible. If budget is an issue, figure out how to do it on as low a budget as possible while still treating people fairly and respectfully. I mean, you see a lot of independent films where people get other people to work for nothing and it becomes like a hellish journey where nobody's getting paid and they're not getting fed and they're working 16 hours. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, have a humane and enjoyable plan for how to have the experience be for everyone, and everyone should have an experience. I'm proud to say that on my films, I think on each one I've had people come away saying, wow, that's the best experience I've had working on a film.
Yeah. If you don't mind my sharing, one of the things I've appreciated working with you is I think you drive hard. Like there were times in Baja, I remember one day where it was everyone's day off, and you called a meeting. I was like, oh, I don't think you can do that. And I also thought, you know, what we're attempting is extremely difficult. I'd rather be in alliance with someone who's pushing hard than sitting back, because sitting back probably won't make it, and pushing hard probably will. And also thinking of the Prankster, because I can remember multiple phone calls where you're like, Greg, you said you were going to have it done last week and it's not done. I was like, Your patience under fire is admirable, and your ability to keep respect for an individual that is pushing patience. And it wasn't just me. I've seen it in production. We're human beings, and so that's been something I've really deeply appreciated.
Well, thank you. And it is hard to know that balance, you know, and I don't want to be overzealous or a maniac, and I don't think I am. I do think that I could, in future, do things in a more relaxed way.
Fingers crossed. It might be just a stressful filmmaking. Might just be a stressful.
No, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I do think that you can walk into it with a different belief and have that be the experience. But it certainly means that there will be times where somebody or something is off course, and yet you have to be firm and prompt in correcting that.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily being a hard ass, that's just fulfilling the vision and being a good captain, you know? I mean, if you're the metaphor for a director is the they're the captain of the ship, or they're helming. That's the variety. You say, hey, this person is helming that movie. You know, if someone is not doing their job and you need them to do their job for the ship to get to shore, then you need to tell them or replace them. You know, get them working or replace them. And there's nothing personal about that. It's just the overall way things work.
Yep, I agree. Well, is there anything that we've left out that you'd like to bring up?
No, this has been great. I've learned a lot just remembering some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you for the opportunity to recapitulate. And one thing I would add is that at this point in time now that it's been over a year since the third film came out, and I have not been actively doing anything film-wise. I've been busy with other interests, but I will say, looking back on it now, I really feel thankful and blessed to have been able to make the films. I'm proud of the films as they are, even though our IMDb ratings are kind of embarrassing, but some of our other ratings on Amazon and so forth are quite good. So the point there is like, don't be dependent on outside approval for you feeling good about what you do. You know, if you feel good about it, then that's all that matters. So what I'm trying to say is, now looking back on it, I feel good about the films. I feel blessed to have made them. I do think they've reached people way more than I even realized, and I have no regrets and no what do they call that? I'm not apologizing for anything like, oh, I wish they'd made more money. That's the thing. Well, I do, but they didn't, and it's still okay, and they're more than okay. They're good films, and they're successful, and they're out there, and let's carry on.